Let's start first with kind of where we are in the competitive position of water rates. You all know we show these to you every year. This was in last week's presentation as well. And this data comes from Texas Town and Country and various city websites that report, and it's May of 2018. So this is relatively real-time data, only about 3 months old. We don't know what other people are considering.
Mr. Overton, you meant Texas Town and City.
Texas
right?
Town and City, you're correct.
There is a Texas Town and Country.
Yep, you're right.
Texas Town and City.
And what we've shown, well, we don't know what other people are doing with their rates. We've shown where we're at and where we're proposing to be. So regardless, in this comparison, we're at the bottom of the list on residential rates. On the commercial side, its story's a little bit different, but still kind of in the lower quartile to lower third as it relates to property or water rates for commercial properties. And you can see what we project that movement to be for an average 50,000 gallon user. And then I know there's been a fair amount of activity because we hear it at City Hall, we hear it in the water department. I know there's been social media activity regarding water rates, and I want to try to address some of that. So kind of first things first, in the sense, water rates, generally speaking, are not tied, or water bills aren't as tied as much to the cost structure as it is to the consumption structure. And so we'll talk a little bit about that, but high water rates are driven by high water consumption. And what we want to make sure is that we give everybody every tool and every resource to conserve, and every motivation to conserve the finite resource that we have. But this summer has brought on some unique challenges, as evidence to some of the emerging drought conditions that, at least until the last couple of days, were a challenge. But then if you just take a look at the data as it relates to average temperatures and rainfall in 2018, just for the month of June, year over year, month of July, year over year, you can see that the average temperature is about 4 degrees warmer, and the rain, at least until the last few days, was notably less. And what that leads to is higher water consumption, as people's yards look a little more parched and they leave that irrigation on just a little bit longer. And before you know it, things have kind of changed, and I'm going to explain that a little bit about how that changes. But consumption is really high. We were having high pumpage, at least prior to these rains. It was notably so, and we were encouraging people to conserve. So if you take a look at some trends, again, looking at the data, and this one you have to read right to left as opposed to left to right, but we've shown up here about 8 years worth of data on the pumpage trends of how many gallons we're utilizing. And while clearly the pumpage in these months is up from the most recent couple of years as reflective of the heat, they do not reflect historic highs for us. If you go back to just 2011, you can see how water utilization was notably higher back then. And so these things they ebb and flow with the weather, they ebb and flow with use, and I can tell you that everyone's situation is unique. While they might have a common theme of certain people thinking there's a high water bill, when you really break it down, they're high for various reasons. Largely is irrigation. Next is leaks, and those are easily tracked by the data that we're able to extract and share with the customer. And I'll show you a little bit about that here in a second. But the biggest thing that people don't understand is what I'm going to show you next is how the rate structure works. And this has been how it's worked for as long as I have known it's worked. But this is kind of the math behind it, and it kind of unveils how it works. So that upper table right here is the cost of service, the fixed fee, access to the line, access to have water. Everyone pays that. No matter how much you use, it's a fixed fee. This is just for the water piece of what we're talking about. Then you pay based on what you use. And kind of counterintuitive, but we have conservation rates, meaning we want people to use less. We want people to be wiser with the resource. So as a result, we say the more you use, the more expensive it is, which is counterintuitive of high volume users usually getting a discount, all right? We don't want high volume users in the water system. We want smart users in this area. And then the tier is broken down by usage on this left-hand column, which has a very much of a survival rate, a minimalist type rate of 0 to 2,000, and then it goes 3 to 10, and that's where most of our people are, is in those first two tiers. Then you get into the middle at 11 to 15, and that's where you capture probably 2/3 of our folks, and then the other quarter to a third are in those upper tiers. But as you cross those lines and work your way up, you can see this works in an inclining way. It's not a flat way, it's an inclining way. The fixed fee is flat. Then it's paced on what you use. And I think Ms. Moise asked this question last meeting as well, is like, well, don't you pay the lower rate for the first 2,000? Yes. And then you pay the next lowest rate for the next 8,000? Yes. And then you pay the next lowest rate. So you pay those lower rates, but as it inclines, the curve accelerates because of the need to consume or conserve. And so when you take a look at how it's done, these are our current year rates, where we're at right now. And last year when you adopted the budget, we made no adjustment to the volumetric basis. It was the same. This is the same this year as it was last year. What we did change was the fixed fee. The fixed fee did go up, but it's a flat fixed fee. It does not bounce around. So that's that piece. But let me show you then kind of what happens and then start to show what happens when you look at Mr. Shepard's question here. So this is the rate proposal that we provided you in the budget. Same math, same rate structure. You have a fixed fee that did not change. This year the fixed fee did not change, and we looked to modify the volumetric rates, again, by the same gallon usage. So you can see for the very modest user, it's about a 30-cent adjustment monthly. And then it accelerates to $1.90, to $3.30, to $7.92, and then $16.53 on the high end. So the heavier user you are, the higher you do pay on that difference of rate structure. So that's what was proposed. Kind of where we're at, just again for some more metrics, I've got a few slides in here that I think are just benchmark information for y'all to have. For July of this year, the hottest month with the most usage that we've had in recent time, I was alluding to this a moment ago, but 71% of our people are in the below 15,000, and really 56% are below the 10,000. And then you have a small amount of people, the 10, 20% that are in the higher tier rates that are consumers of water, and kind of how it works. So almost 100,000 accounts. It's a lot of accounts, almost 100,000 residential accounts. And that's based on utilization. So a couple other ways to look at this. We did a benchmark comparison, again, month to month, year over year, to see what this would look like. And this chart is based on water usage by the thousands of gallons that people use. And we had a little bit of a hypothesis here that worked out to be what we thought. But as you go down the list of fall and early winter, it's pretty flat through here. And the colors are all based on which tier you're in. So the dark blue is 0 to 2, the medium blue is 3 to 10, the green is 11 to 15, and then the orange and the red are the higher consumer users. And so this looks pretty much like you would expect, is in the cooler months when people are not consuming water as much, the comparison of this year's activities to last year's activities, very similar. But as things got hotter in June and July, look what happened. As people accelerated their consumption of water and they crossed into the next rate tier, it accelerated on them. So you can see the difference of people who were 3 to 10, it went down. And I've got more green, orange, and red because they went into the next tier. Same thing in July. A lot more orange and red, because they went to the next tier. So that's what's happening out there. Is it's the inclining block rate structure that as people consume more, it accelerates, and we need to give people tools and motivation to use less. And we've got some of those that I'll talk to you about here in a second. This was a chart based on gallons of use. Similar chart based on percentage of accounts that got into those rate blocks. So this reflects in June and July the change of people who used to be in a rate block that now became a different rate block, and then that changed the water bill. Okay? So, okay.
Swalman.
Could you, because this is kind of mind-boggling to me, are you saying that in those months where where you were over here in the summer, okay, and those red blocks, those residents used more than 20 or 30,000 gallons of water in that month?
The people in red used
Yeah.
more than 30,000 gallons of water. The people in orange
residents.
used
Okay.
more than 16,000 gallons of water.
Okay.
What I'm trying to show here, though, is not how much they used. I'm trying to show the shift and why people feel it's different. Something's changed. And what's changed is the consumption pattern. And it leads to a different rate structure and therefore a higher water bill. And what has typically been the case, and I've talked to our staff a lot about it, is water bills used to be relatively immaterial to the family budget. Just in my time, my water bill in Arlington has gone from, I remember it being kind of about $30 to now on average my water bill is probably between $80 and $90. And I irrigate and I do all the things that I do. And I agree that I would be equally as concerned about a shift that really accelerated.
Yes.
But that's what's happening here.
Go ahead, Ms. Wolf.
I'm just curious because I hear people say, my pool is losing an inch to an inch and a half.
Yes.
Do we keep track? Do we know how many people keep that pool? You've got to keep it above that water
No,
line.
we don't, but pools are a large user. Pools are a large user because you lose water to evaporation during really hot months, and irrigators, probably irrigation, pools, and leaks are the biggest consumers of unanticipated water use. When people are washing dishes and taking baths, that's all very predictable. What's not predictable is, well, I just left my irrigation on a little bit longer because it was brown and I needed to kind of water it up. Well, that little bit longer is noticeable when the water bill shows up. And it's no longer immaterial, which is why we've been working heavily with our own cost structure of the controllable costs that we have. You all know only about half of the water and sewer bill do we control. The other half is pass-through expenses to the regional water district. There's a lot of people out there talking about various things, but I know you all know this. We buy our water through the Tarrant Regional Water District, and we pass through those costs directly. We get our wastewater service through the Trinity River Authority, and we pass through those costs directly. Those are always our largest pass-through costs. We have worked with those agencies this year and really in recent years trying to control those costs. This year we actually, for the first time, I believe, in recent years, had really no increase from the Tarrant Water District, but we're passing through almost $5 million worth of capital increase from the Trinity River Authority. We can't absorb that. It's a direct cost as a growing metropolitan area, not just Arlington, but the whole area needs infrastructure for wastewater service and needs infrastructure for water service. So that's also what's going on with these water rates. We've, in fact, in our own controllable cost, reduced our cost this year by $600,000 of what we pass through to the water bill. The rest is we have to buy raw water, and it comes from the water district. We have to have a vendor to do the sewer service, and it's the regional authority. So we pass through all those expenses and then control the rest.
Ms. Moyes.
So I think I've shared with you recently, I'm not sure you've had time to read the emails I forwarded, but we have a lot of residents in North Arlington right now who have the new meters. And their bills are going up exponentially, and I think they don't know, and I don't know how to explain to them how much of it's due to the new meter And so I just have a really fairly simple question. So their old meter sent in just the reading, the differential, to show how much water they'd used. And the new electronic meter that they have does the same thing, right? It's not calculating their bill. There's something inside a program within the city that takes that number and calculates the bill, because there's a process that goes into this. So what, when they talk about bills going, the neighborhood website has 446 email string on it. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of chatter. Mm-hmm. And they're talking about bills that go from 120 to 360 fairly often. So as I look at this, I still don't see how you could get to these numbers. So how do I work with them, and where do I send them to get answers to some of these questions?
So there's a number that I've got some more information that I'm about to show you that I think will assist you in your question. Where you should send them is to the water department. In response to some of those emails, Mr. Cummings with his staff have been out hosting some neighborhood meetings. They've done at least one and have some others scheduled, where we are trying to work through materials like this to help people understand kind of what's going on and what the situation is. And it's a mixed bag. Some people simply don't understand how the structure works, and that enlightens them and it motivates them more to figure out the conservation. Others have discovered that they've had a leak, and through our efforts, we've helped them identify that and get it repaired. And others have found that their irrigation, they thought it was set once, but it was set twice. And the data is very clear. Here it goes at 1 o'clock in the morning, and here it goes at 4 o'clock in the morning. You can see it crystal clear. And so we do have an unintended use policy. And so Craig can probably come up here in a few minutes and talk a little bit about that. But basically, once every 24 months, we're not saying you had a leak, but we do know that you were surprised and you had an unintended use, whether your pool was doing something or your irrigation was set wrong. And once every 24 months, we'll let a person at their own election say, I want to take advantage of that policy, which lets us do a reduction to their bill, but it can't be again next month or again the next month. It's once every 24 months where you have this kind of unanticipated thing that's occurred, and I'll have Craig explain it here in a second, but we do have that ability, but they do need to call the water department and go over their account. Every one of these stories is unique. There are some themes, and you can see some patterns, but everyone's story is a little different, and there are some unique situations that need to be dealt with on an individual basis.
Well, and then I have one more question, and then I'll get off this topic, but how does Arlington structure wastewater? Some cities charge wastewater on the entire bill as a percentage of it. Some cities stop at a certain level because they figure that's your part, what's really running through the sewer system, and the rest is irrigation, which doesn't run through the sewer system. So how does Arlington calculate that?
I'll get some, I've got some data here in a minute, but to be more specific, we use the lowest 3 months of your water bill, which generally is, I think, December, January, February.
Okay.
We use those 3 months, and then it's a ratio of the water use for the lowest 3 months becomes your wastewater calculation. So I think it's 60% or something along those lines, and one of these guys can help me with the detail on that, but it's a ratio of your 3 lowest months, or those 3 lowest months. So
in other words, turn your sprinkler systems off in December,
in those
January,
months,
February.
don't use water because it will have an effect, a cumulative effect to your sewer side.
Okay, got it.
So we don't meter sewer. It is based on that calculation. We do meter water, and the meters are accurate.
And that's been my experience with most cities.
They're accurate. And they are held to an industry standard from the vendor to supply it. We, in the council's wisdom a couple of years ago, internal audit took a look at water billing as well as water metering, and they validated that the new meters are accurate. Okay. So we had an independent review there as well. And so I know that's a lot of a concern around that topic, but actually what we hope it's going to do is give people a lot of tools to manage their conservation. Just here in the next few weeks, we're going to go live with a new website that will be able to show you your water use in like 15-minute increments. You'll very easily be able to see, if you have one of those new meters, how your water flow is going, whether there is a flow or not, and if so, kind of what the situation may be. But let me
Without
do a
having to
couple
go
of the
out and
things.
physically turn off your meter so you can see if it's still registering
You
flow.
can do that.
Yeah.
Yes, you can do that. But let me show you a few other things that might be helpful to you as you all have conversations with folks in the neighborhoods. So as it relates to the question of automated meters versus regular meters, based on some of that feedback, I asked the water people to pull some data for me and said, we're about 50% automated and about 50% old. And we've been on a 10-year phase-in. We didn't want to do it all at once because we don't want to fatigue all the infrastructure at one time. We want to be able to orderly phase in the capital cost and orderly handle breakage and all that happens. But here's the difference. So right now we're at about 60% has been changed out. And so I just wanted to know, can you guys run me a side-by-side comparison of people who have automated bills and people who don't have automated bills on a graduated scale based on $50 increments? What does that look like? And what it looks like is this: 26 to 27% of the bills are still under $50. 45 and 41 are under 100, 16% more at 100. It looks very similar as you go down the comparison of the two styles. So I do think it's something that concerns people, and we need to do more on the education side to help them understand how the technology works and such. But I would think that our audit work that was done, our vendor work that was done, and just simply a 1-month snapshot of what's going on at the highest month provides me some reassurance that while there's discrepancies in what people feel is going on, it still is very much tied to the consumption side, whether it's intended or unintended, to leaks or those kinds of things. But this, I think, Ms. Moise, might help you a little bit with that automated meter question, as well as the situation. And just so you know, if people do have a concern about their water bill, or not only individually talk to us and help us, we can help you understand your situation, but if you want a new meter, we'll give you a new meter. If you just don't trust the one that's in the ground, we're happy to replace it, just to give you that extra peace of mind and just not question it. It is not our goal to make more money from water rates. It's our goal to provide good, safe, quality drinking water at the lowest possible cost. And that lowest possible cost has a consumption side to that formula. And so we need you to have the tools and the awareness to manage water the same way you would electricity and the same way you would gas or the same way you would any of your other utility costs. That's unfortunately that move of water being a de minimis amount of our budget to being more material, or shockingly more material in one of these inclining hot summers. We've got to work hard to educate people along the lines that I'm doing right now with you all to help them understand how to control their costs and conserve resources. So that might help you. And then additionally, this is an example of just one person's bill, actually a person who contacted water. And let me, again, working kind of right to left, you can see this person's usage, particularly in the months of June there that are in the green. So in 2016, peaks out here. In 2018, it's here. And so what we did is in this particular case, we found this person had an incorrect, or they didn't know what their irrigation setting was. It had been changed because they got a new system or their lawn man changed something. Well, once we went out, because we provide a free service to do a irrigation audit for you. It's funded through the Tarrant Regional Water District. I've asked Craig, based on some of the inquiries this year, to find ways to get more people because I think those are kind of, quote, sold out at the moment. But we're trying to find some other people who can do additional audits. But in this case, this person got an audit, and you can see what happened between June and July. Almost a 60% reduction from 170,000 gallons down to about 70,000 gallons. That's what can happen when someone's not tracking the irrigation. It's kind of out of sight, out of mind. A lot of these things are on at night. They don't know they're running. They don't know they're running as long as they think they are. And it is an unintended use, and we can look at their chart and we can make an adjustment for them, but then we got to make sure we don't have to make that adjustment again in the future. So this is just one example, and this is from, I think, a manual meter. But on the automated meters, the data is much more specific. Like I said, on 15-minute increments. And you all might remember Buzz a couple of years ago giving you a presentation where you could very clearly see the irrigation system come on, and then it drops all the way back down, and then comes on and drops all the way back down. Or you can see that constant low flow, which would tell you there's a leak going on. And then I see some folks will say, yeah, but what about this, what I guess has been dubbed as phantom water use in the middle of the night? You know, a couple, 3 gallons, you know, what happened? And, you know, those are hard to explain, but truth of the matter is, when you take a look at it, and I'm sure you've all had these various experiences at your home, you can have a flapper on a toilet that leaks ever so little bit. And then in the middle of the night, it might wake you up because it recharges the toilet. Well, that's a couple of gallons of use right there because the toilet refilled itself because it knew it got low. Or your ice machine dropped a load of ice and then put more water in the ice machine, right? It's these kinds of things that are automatically happening all around our life that we take for granted, and it doesn't feel like anything changed. It doesn't feel like we did anything different, but things are happening all around us all the time that are consuming the water resource. So we just have to pay attention and help people, counsel them through some of these choices. And then occasionally, and fairly often, we give these unintended adjustments. And it really, I think, helps our residents address the matter. So,
Well, and Trey, what I'm going to do, because I can never explain all of this as well as you do, if anybody asks me, I'm going to tell them to go to this date's meeting from the minutes of 50 minutes into the meeting to 70 minutes into the meeting, and they'll have their explanation.
that'll be fine. And
So
then
thank you very much for all of the detail.
And we also will, to me, it's also, that might not be great because it's kind of impersonal, but if Mr. Cummings and his staff are happy to go out to any neighborhood association, to any group of citizens that wants to meet and talk about this, or to just any individual who wants to call him up and go through it so that we can look at the account. We've been doing a lot of that these last few days, and we will continue to do that until we've satisfied people's questions and concerns about it. But I can assure everyone that the meters are correct. They are registering appropriately, and that's been independently validated by multiple sources. And the data is correct, and the dollars that we make here fund our improvements to the water system. It's held in our water fund. We're not building a ballpark with our water utilities. We are not building Texas Live with our water utilities. Those kinds of things are not happening. It's all within the rate structure. And to the degree that we do great in the water fund, and you all have done it the last 4 or 5 years for certain, you might remember we have this rate stabilization fund to help curve rates. Every year for at least the last 4 years, the City Council has refunded back to our water rate payers the first 3 months of the rate adjustment. So it doesn't show up as a $9 credit on your bill, if you will, but the deferment of January rate setting instead of October is $9 real in a ratepayer's pocket, because we've taken the proceeds that we made this year and rolled them forward to offset the consumer cost next year. Okay? Let me show you a few other things. So this is responsive to Mr. Shepard's specific question about, is there a way to take the rate structure and modify it on the higher end to affect lower rate, to minimize rate adjustments on the earlier end or the lower cost structure? So here under this particular scenario, the variable we've changed is the one in yellow. And we kept all the other rates consistent with this current year, not even what we proposed, but this current year's rate. If you make an adjustment to the over 30,000 gallon use, it increases that particular user by $29.61. If you elected to make that rate adjustment, it would affect that one class of residents, and we would keep the rest of this the same. So that's one example of Mr. Shepard's question being put into action. Another way to look at it would be if you feathered it down and kind of shared not just the top, but say the top 3, and made adjustments in those top 3 tiers. You pull the top one down just a little bit, a few more dollars, $26, $12, and $2, and then you keep the lower users level. So fundamentally, it's a question of how the block structure is done and at what incline is it. So we've given you that proposal that we suggested back. These are 2 examples of how refinements or adjustments to there could change where the the modifications are in the rate structure to overall provide the water service in town. So, and it's all based on the volumetric side. We did not change the fixed fee side on any of those. So, hopefully that's helpful on Mr. Shepard's question about water rates, as well as just the various things that are going on in the community regarding questions. A couple of things I want to make sure, at least one that I know that I've heard out there that I want to make sure we remove kind of a wives' tale around is people believe that the city doesn't read the meter and that we just estimate the bill. And so that is largely not accurate, but there are cases where we will estimate. It reflects about 1% to 2% of our cases, and it's usually when the water meter is somehow covered. If a car's parked over it or if debris is placed on top of it, our water guy's not going to move a bunch of stuff to get to the water bill. He will estimate that, and then we'll settle it up next month with a real reading. It's very minimal. It's hardly ever used. We don't do that a lot. You'll hear a few stories about how the water meter read one, but then skipped two, and then read another. And the answer to that is not every street is fully manual or fully automated. They are still pockets of mixed areas. So it very well could be the case that a meter reader manually read one and walked by the next two because those were automated and did not need to be read. Over time, we will not have meter readers in our community because they will all be automated. And the data will be downloaded via the air into our billing system per our rates and then sent to the customer with the website availability for them to control how they use water. But the consumer awareness, the need to pay attention to this consumable like they would any other utility is important. And we're going to work hard in the months and years ahead to make sure we start to try to assist people with tools and awareness to make this less of a concern in the summertime months about water bills that are higher than anticipated.
Any other comments, questions on this? Mr. Shepard?
Trey, thank you very much for the information. It's helpful. And I guess for our purposes in budgeting, we could just kind of take a look at this and think about it before we get to the end of this process. My hope has always been that we would have these conservation motivation rates because we, more often than not, can do something about the water that we consume. I also find, I know it probably isn't consistent, but our elderly and disadvantaged population is generally on the lower end of usage. They don't have irrigation systems. I don't mean to broadly generalize, and so I'm hoping that we can, and whether it's this or some other structure, I'm hoping there's a way we can kind of minimize the impact as much as possible on the small user, and again continue to focus on those users of a lot of water, which unfortunately I'm one of them, apparently, according to my bill. But it gets your attention, you know, as Trey alluded to earlier. You know, when it's $30-40 a month, you know, it doesn't fall in the electricity category where all of a sudden you're running the AC all the time and you get a $500 electric bill. You're like, whoa, got to do something. So anyway, I appreciate you doing that, and it's food for thought. I don't know, you know, where we end up on this issue, but water rates have always been kind of tricky because of the amount we have to pass through. So that variable rate, the little we do have control over, I think we need to kind of keep in mind the conservation aspect of it and perhaps shift some of that more than normal, I guess, to the larger users. So, thank you.
And Mayor, if we could, before we move off this topic, I would like Mr. Cummings to come up here and talk for a moment about that unintended adjustment process and how that works. And then, of course, as kind of the historical water professional, he might have a little something that he wants to refine more than what I said. And then at the same time, I don't think he's been up here in front of you since he was appointed water director, so I just want to introduce him to you as well and let you know Craig Cummings.
Mr. Cummings, glad to have you and appreciate your service already to our city, and we're excited for your new position here. Go ahead, Mr. Cummings.
I'm ecstatic. Thank you. Mayor, council, excuse me, I'm dealing with a bit of a cold, so I may turn away from time to time. The water use adjustment is basically a leveling factor where we look at what the traditional use has been, and it is on our website. You can simply look on our website. They can call in, and what we do is we look at a couple of months. We will level that out. It does not forgive the water use completely, because it is our I guess, contention that the water went through the meter. What we do is we charge only the marginal rate for that water, which is basically what it cost us to produce that water. So we will level that to what traditional use has been for those months where it was high, and we'll just do a couple of months. We won't do it for 6 months at a time. And again, as Trey mentioned, that's once every 2 years, and that's an election by the individual. They don't have to take it if they think, boy, I could have a leak next year and I'd want to hold on to this. They can do that. But we do that for quite a few customers. It's not a question of what happened. We just are there to help that particular customer. In fact, directly before this meeting, I was meeting with a customer and offered him that particular adjustment. Now, another thing I want to mention that Trey had alluded to was, and I think there was a question about particular neighborhoods having a lot of chatter on social media. And the reason is, quite frankly, if you look at some of the increases in those particular neighborhoods over last year, in July, they were 60% higher in water use than what they had seen in July of last year. So there was a lot more water being used in those particular neighborhoods. And I'd like to point out that some of those neighborhoods, there's this tendency to want to link the new meters to this phenomenon of high bills. We've been installing these meters, and in fact, our pilot project was in some of those northern and western neighborhoods in 2011. And quite frankly, from 2011 until this summer, we haven't heard nary a peep about these remote reading meters. And we have about 60,000 of them installed. It's just this year when we had these very dry conditions and we had irrigation taking place like it hasn't taken place for many, many years, that we started to see a lot of the calls. And we'll deal with customers one-on-one. We will literally go out and check that irrigation system. We will help people with leaks. We'll do what we have to do to try and convince them that, look, this meter is accurate, because they are. In fact, we test, when new meters come in from the factory, we grab a couple out of every pallet and we test them for accuracy when they come in, let alone when they're installed. They do have to meet industry standards. So we're very confident that these meters are accurate. And I do want to point out, there's a lot of misconceptions about these new meters. These meters, we call them new meters, they're the same old meters. It is the exact same meter that we've been installing in Arlington for decades. The only difference is we can now read it through radio waves as opposed to a meter reader going by with a pencil or punching into a computer. It is the exact same meter. It has no power. It is not a smart meter like you think an electric meter is. We can't shut somebody's water off through that water meter. It is a passive device. It simply records the readings, and every 4 hours sends those to us. So, if you will, it's kind of the same old dumb meter, and it has no capability of controlling anything whatsoever. So they're very accurate, and quite frankly, once we show data to our customers, although folks don't like it sometimes, we can show them when their usage was taking place and if they had a leak or if they need to adjust their sprinkler settings. So that's kind
Ms.
of what
Thalman.
Thank you. Directly before this meeting, Mr. Cummings and I met with a resident in my district who had quite a significant spike in water usage during the month of July, and he came in his words, ready to fight. And as I would be if, my water bill had, quadrupled or whatever. So, but Mr. Cummings was able to put all of this in pretty simple terms and explain it in a way that was very satisfactory. And at the end of the meeting, there were literally hugs, and he was happy. He was a customer. It was a positive customer service experience, and the professionalism was just amazing. So I appreciate that, and you'll be getting a lot more my water complaints moving forward. Thanks.
Please send
Ms.
them our
Thalman.
way. That's what we're there for.
Mr. Shepherd.
Thank you, Mayor, and I just wanted to thank Mr. Cummings. Welcome aboard, and I'm
Thank
glad
you.
there's another Ohio State fan in the water department.
I'm from Illinois. Let me correct that. I went to a small school where we produced Tony Romo, I will help you understand. So,
Ms. Wolf.
yeah, very
Thank you,
good.
Thank you, Mr. Cummings. Could you tell us the date and time when you're going to have the public hearing, not the public hearing, but the town hall meeting in the west side?
I do not have that off the top of my head. It has been set,
It's been
though. We do have
posted,
that.
so.
And we're going to set another one, probably more north, and we were thinking maybe Viridian. We're looking into whether or not we could use some space there, but we kind of want to move it around different parts of the city. Certainly, we're starting there because that's where a lot of the issues have arisen, so we want to go right
I think it's
there.
up to us to look into that and then encourage your neighborhoods, if they have issues or just want to come learn, to come to the.
Yes.
And we'll send that information out to all of you.
Okay.
And I thought I'd live one last little trick of the trade, I guess, that I learned during this process. Is I heard one person talk about how you can turn your water off, and then you go to your meter and see if it's flowing. And if you have the old style meter, it has a little spinner thing on it, so you can tell if water is flowing through it. And the concern was that the new style meter did not. But what the new style meter does have is an electronic face on it. And if you look at it, it will record with a positive sign to let you know if you see the plus, water's flowing through the meter. So if any of you who need that just little tool, if they're saying, I can't tell, if it's got the plus on the face, there is flow, even though they think they've turned everything off. So it's a little trick of the trade. So we'll rely on Craig to kind of go out and work with residences and hopefully address these and go through much of the information that we've shared. And hopefully it will be satisfactory to folks, and we'll see where we go.